In today's video, I'm going to attempt to put a lock-right locker into this front differential from a 1989 Suzuki Sidekick. I was told that you can put these in, but you can't use the second and third cross pin. It'll only end up having the one big main pin, and I'll demonstrate that as I go through the video. The very first thing that I did was mark the bearing adjusters and the housings with a couple of punch marks so that I can get this put back in exactly how it came out. There has to be a certain compression on the bearing on these. So I put 2 punch marks here on the adjuster and 2 more punch marks here on the cap so that I know for sure I'm getting the correct adjuster on the correct side and also set to the correct torque. I've marked the other side identically, except there's only a single mark on the adjuster and a single mark on the cap. So added insurance just to make sure that I get these caps on the right side. I'm also marking them with punch marks. So I got 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here. That's for cap number 2 on this side. I've also marked the other side with a single punch here and a single punch on the cap. So make sure it goes together correctly. So I didn't have much room to work on this table. Camera was kind of in the way. So I've already knocked these loose using a breaker bar. So I'll just take these bolts loose and remove the caps. And I'm going to be careful to watch for any shims or anything and mark which side they come from. Just to make sure, again, everything goes back correctly when I reassemble. As you can see, the bearing caps have already come loose a little bit. And so the bearing is starting to slip out. You can see this thing here is already a little wobbly. Oh, there you go. So I'll just leave that cap, bearing race, and bolt set just right there so I know they all go together. Boy, this one's a little bit tough. Yes, I do have sockets. I'm just too lazy to grab one right now. There we go. And out comes the carrier. So the ring gear is going to have to come off of the assembly. So again, I marked it so everything will go back exactly where it's supposed to be. So I've marked it here on this ring, and then also a mark on the gear itself. I had to take this out to my big shop vise so I could clamp this thing in to knock all the bolts loose around here. I mean, those things are in there. It's got to be at least 100 pounds of torque or more. So I knocked all those loose, and you can see off to the side here I've already got the ring gear popped off. So this section here should just pop right off the top. Well, maybe. Okay, so maybe that's pressed in. I'll have a look here. I gave it a light tap just right here along this joint, and it just popped right loose. So when I lift it off, the gear came with it, and there is a shim here on the back of the gear. So I'm going to keep that with this side of the case over here, you know, so that I don't lose it and I know which side that it came from. Okay, so the next step, I got to knock this little retention pin out of here. It's just one of those little compression pins. So I'm going to lightly tap that, knock it out of place. Sorry about that. And came right out the bottom. So there's the pin. I'll just set that to the side as well. Okay, this big cross pin and these spider gears have to come out next. And I believe that I'm seeing shims. Looks like a couple of shims on each side. I'll know for sure once I knock this pin out of there. Okay. It looks like it was just a single shim on that side. And also a single shim on this side. So pull the pin out. Okay, we got it that far. These side gears have to be inspected to make sure that they're still in good shape. I sort of have an advantage in this area. I used to work for Lynn Gear Company down in Lebanon, Oregon. And, you know, this is what I did all day for 2.5 years, is just build all sorts of different gears. Even ones that were almost exactly like this. And I can tell by looking at them that although they're shiny, there is no major wear of any kind. The profile's still right. The mesh was still good. It's not offset funny at all. And so, you know, these are going to be perfectly good gears to put back in to work with that Lockrite kit. So now I'm going to drop in the first half of the locker. You can see it's got these, it kind of looks like gears, but they're really not. They're just, you know, notches that are set to lock in to the side gear. And it's these that, you know, they pop in and out as the driving pin pushes on them. And as long as you're driving straight forward, these push out evenly and they lock into the gear and lock together with each other and drive forward. But the way they slip, when you turn, one tire is going to turn more than the other. And you can see this big notch right here where the pin rides. Only the one tire is going to end up pushing on the edge of this because of the one tire turning faster than the other. And so it's only going to push the one side out, and it'll allow the other side to, I guess, essentially ratchet and still go around the corner without it, you know, binding up and putting wear on your tire. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in. And you can see, you know, how it's meshing into the gear. And then I got to drop in this little ring. It's just some spacer in there that goes between the pin and the lower side gear. Okay, so the next step is to drive in the cross pin that came with this kit. It's just a little bit longer than the stock one, and it doesn't have these funny little side cutouts. It doesn't have the hole for putting the retention pin back in, but the ring gear itself is going to keep this pin centered once it's bolted back into place. Now, something I feel I should mention at this point. This is the 1510 LR Lockrite kit. And supposedly this is not supposed to go into the front of a Geo Tracker or Suzuki Sidekick. But all you end up doing is not using the side pins. So it's not going to be as strong as it's intended to be unless you have a machine shop machine in a couple of more slots in order to put those side pins in. And honestly, I would not recommend doing it this way if you're going to be doing any heavy duty off-roading. I mean, if you're going to be doing real heavy duty off-roading, you don't want to be keeping that stock aluminum case in the front anyway, so you want to be going with a stronger setup. But all of my four-wheeling, I'm not a big mud bogger. I don't go up a lot of really steep hill climbs and rocky trails and, you know, things like that. I just have some really steep roads that I go up in the winter time. Our driveway's bad in the winter, extra slick, icy. In the hunting season, there's a big hill that I like to go up that, you know, also it's really, really steep. And when it gets a little damp out, it can get pretty slick. So I don't expect to put mine through any real heavy duty, you know, extreme four-wheeling. So this setup should work for me, but I'm still keeping around an extra front set of ring and pinion and differential and everything just in case. So this kit, it comes with 4 pins and 8 springs. The springs, I don't know why they didn't just use one heavier duty bigger spring, but it actually has a smaller spring and a bigger spring, and you have to put these smaller springs inside of the bigger spring, and then you put a little bit of grease into the round holes, and you put the double spring into each hole, and then you also put grease in these oval holes. So yeah, I'll pull this pin back out so you can see. Well, it doesn't want to come out. Okay, that grease is a little stickier than I thought. So, see how that hole is ovaled? Those are the ones where the pins go. So I'll go ahead and drop the pin in for this one. And these are shear pins, so that, you know, if you're going to have a failure, hopefully it fails there and not in something that's a lot more expensive. So I've already got the pins and the springs in on this one. So I'm going to drop the other spring in, the other pin into this hole, the double spring into this one, put this set together, and drop that in to the last one. So that's how it should look. So now I need to put the second half of the locker in, and I need to line up these springs, and actually it looks like I may have lost. Nope, it's in there. It's in there. So the springs are going to line up with the pins, so that the pins will actually push into there and put a little bit of compression onto it. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in. I've got grease in there to keep everything from falling out when I turn it over, so hopefully that works like it should. And then the extra ring spacer will go on top of that. Okay, so from this point, reassembly is going to be just the opposite. So first thing I'm going to do, put back this shim so that it's in the correct spot. Then I need to find that divot that's on the edge of this ring, so I can make sure I get everything lined up correctly. So there it is, just right there on that front edge there. And then I got to find the divot on this other ring, line it up as well. And then I'll get that ring gear lined up also with its notch. I'll get it most of the way tightened down, and then I'm going to take it out to the shop, get it in the vise again, and get that tightened down to the torque spec. I'll look up the torque spec, and on the next segment of the video, I'll tell you what it is. Okay, so I've got that ring gear bolted on and torqued down. When I looked up the torque spec, it said it needed to be somewhere between 69.5 to 75 foot-pounds. So I set my torque wrench for 72. So, you know, that puts it right there in the middle. So now it's ready to go ahead and put the bearing caps on. And then we can go ahead and slide the bearing races from the sides. And once I get that far, then I'll change the angle and get going on that. Okay, so I've got everything installed back into the third member carrier. The big bolts here, they got torqued down to 50 foot-pounds. These ones, they only get torqued down to 10 foot-pounds. All of the marks are lining up correctly on both sides. It's got good mesh, it's got good backlash. So this is ready to go into the housing. So we'll go to that next step. So I'm just about ready to join the carrier to the differential case. And what I've done to make sure I get a good seal, I've completely removed all the old gasket sealer around, both surfaces. And I also took some denatured alcohol on a rag and cleaned it up really well, just to make sure there wasn't any grease or anything left over. And then I put a very thin bead of RVT silicone all the way around on both surfaces. And I want to make a special note here, and I've said it in previous videos, but I'm still going to say it again. With RVT sealer, generally the thinner the better when you have these really flat mating surfaces. Unless it calls for a thick bead, never do that. You always want to put on a thin bead. If you get too much on this kind of a surface, what you're going to end up with is torquing it down, and years down the road, some of that stuff can end up squeezing out of there, and then you end up with a big leak. When you do it this way, you're able to torque it down all the way, without having any compression from too much silicone. And so it'll seat down properly, and you'll have just enough that it'll seal up all the way around. So again, less is better. If you can see it on there, you probably have enough. Okay, so now I have a front differential that's 90% put back together. I put all the bolts in all the way around, torqued every one of them down to 10 foot-pounds. The only thing I haven't done yet, and I'm not going to do this until I get the seals, I still need to put the seal in on this side. And then I have not put in the stub axle on this side yet, because I still need to pop out and replace this seal as well. But aside from that, this thing's ready to go, and it now has a Lock-Right locker in it.